Oh, hello and welcome back to the Ourlads Depth Charts Show. We are here today with David Syvertsen. He is our Ourlads scout and he is joining us today. He doesn't usually join us, but we're excited to have him here. We're also joined by our two regulars, Cory Henke, the Prince of Punters, and Tucker Moss, the Duke of Depth Charts. How's it going, guys?
What's up, Ryan?
This is the only depth chart show in the entire world, and it's brought to you by Ourlads, the most accurate and up-to-date depth charts in the land. Is that right, Tucker?
I think so. Yeah, I hope so.
Oh, no, it's definitely so, Tucker. Come on.
I try to keep them accurate. I think that they're better than most websites for sure.
All websites. I'll say it. You don't have
that. Put that Tucker. On Tucker's tombstone. Better than most websites. All right.
We gotta stay humble here. All right.
That's true.
All right. Well, we gotta work on Tucker's confidence. Yeah, we are the Ourlads Depth Chart Show. We are gonna go around the league, give you all the latest updates that have been happening with the depth charts and newsworthy items, as well as take a deep dive into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers depth chart and the Miami Dolphins depth charts because there's some news going on around them. And I will let Tucker kick it off. Where do you want to start on the Ourlads depth charts updates? And I will share the screen in just a second.
I want to start by saying it's gotten pretty busy. It looks like it's starting to pick up a little steam. We're getting a little chugga. We're getting going here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of transactions yesterday and today. Now that I think all the camps are open now. But yeah, today there was a couple that are new that we weren't able to talk about in our pre-show meeting. So Mekhi Blackmon for the Vikings, and he was competing to potentially be a starter at nickel. He tore his ACL, unfortunately, so we've kind of started that time of year of the injuries going down, and so obviously they already Kyrie Jackson passed away earlier, and now they lost Blackmon to an ACL, so this really hurts them because they already had a pretty weak cornerback room. So I know they signed Duke Shelley recently, so they might grab another guy here soon. Besides that, the other thing I wanted to mention was there's two did not reports today for contract holdouts. So Trent Williams, left tackle for the 49ers, is officially holding out now. And Hassan Reddick, who we've heard about a lot, with the Jets wanting a contract, he did not report. So he's also officially holding out. Those were the new things that we kind of had that we didn't have in our document. But yeah, do you guys have any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, Blackmon was we had a 4th round grade on him coming out of USC, coming into the 2023 draft. And he was drafted after the 3rd round before the 4th in the compensatory pick selection. I think it was 103 overall. They did have one of the youngest cornerback rooms in all the NFL last year. And he was thrown into the action and actually played, especially in the middle of the year. He flashed, and the talent with him was always evident that he could handle speed and quickness at the next level. He was just a very undersized corner, but he flashed last year, and I thought he was going to be in line to be the number 2 and number 3 there. So definitely a room, like you said, Tucker, a thin cornerback room, just lost their thinnest corner, but also a guy that could have been a big factor. They're going to really rely on Andrew Booth, another young corner out of Clemson who has had significant knee issues dating all the way back to college, and they followed him to the NFL. So beyond that, I mean, it's going to be Byron Murphy is the guy there. And if he's your number 1, it's okay, but they don't really have a solid 2, solid 3. So that's a big one. Another one just came through a couple hours ago is Darion Kendrick from the Rams. He also tore his ACL. I think it was either today or yesterday. So same kind of same church, different pew kind of situation, a late rounder that really kind of, exceeded expectations and became a starting or at least a big time contributor to the cornerback group for the Rams. And he's out for the year as well now. So there's going to be two teams looking for street free agents there.
Wow. All right. We got a lot of updates here. I'm so overwhelmed with updates after not being able to have any updates. So this is great, guys.
How could you possibly keep up with it all, Ryan?
Yeah. Well, that is a great question that you ask. If you want to be added to our Ourlads Depth Charts updates sheet, there you go. Go ahead and just email us at team@ourlads.com. And I'll put it up on the screen there. It's over Tucker's face, team@ourlads.com. We will add you to the Ourlads Depth Chart Updates sheet. This is something that will be a premium service before long. So get in now and learn for free how you can get on the Depth Chart Updates tracker. Another one that we talked about is the Saints, Ryan Ramczyk, to miss the entire season. Right, Tucker?
Yeah, and that was something that was expected with his, he's been having some major knee issues going on, and so it's been talked about throughout the offseason. It's just last week after our show, it became official where he was placed on the reserve PUP list, which means you're out for the year. So this basically, this was expected, but it is official now, and right now I think Trevor Penning has been rolling as he's going to be like their starting right tackle, but obviously he's struggled so far. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to improve here and step up in place, because Ryan Ramczyk's been one of their best offensive players last many years. So it'll be a big prove it year for him.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Dave? Is that a real hit to the Saints offense?
Enormous hit. In often cases, I thought that Ryan Ramczyk was going to be arguably the most important player on that offense outside of quarterback, because if you remember, they just spent their first round pick on Talise Fuaga, a right tackle from Oregon State, and they're immediately going to put him on the blind side, protecting Derek Carr's blind side at left tackle. And that's a spot he really doesn't have any experience at. Trevor Penning was drafted in 2022 to take over this role, but he has been a total, complete, and utter bust, maybe the worst first-round pick from that class so far. They're trying to find a spot for him at guard. Right now, it's going to be at right tackle. I still think he's going to end up inside at some point, or as that valuable sixth lineman that can play multiple spots. But with Ramczyk out, a three-time All-Pro, 2018 through 2020, got his career off to a great start. But again, like Tucker said, fell into those knee issues and just never fully recovered. He hasn't played a full season since then. And Cam Irving and Landon Young filled in for him last year when he got hurt. Landon Young is still there. Neither of them look good. The name I'm looking for right now at right tackle is a kid they signed from Minnesota. I don't even want to try to say his first name, so it's Oli Udoh from Minnesota. He's a sixth-year pro. He has 8 career starts. He was a full-time starter in 2021. And that's the kind of guy that I think where his floor is. At least he does not have a high ceiling that's been confirmed, but the issue with Trevor Penning, you don't know how low that floor is. So if you have a rookie left tackle that's never played there and a right tackle where the bottom could completely fall out, what are you doing with this offense? And the Ryan Ramczyk being out for good is a bad sign for a team that had very little margin to work with.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, moving on. We don't want to get too hung up on the Saints. Eddie Jackson signs with the Ravens, and Cam Akers signed with the Houston Texans. Tucker, do any of these additions matter?
The Eddie Jackson one does matter because they lost. Obviously they have Kyle Hamilton, who's one of the best young safety, probably the best safety in the league right now, and Marcus Williams as well as kind of their tandem. But last year they had Geno Stone as well. They like to play with 3 safeties a lot. So last year Hamilton moved everywhere. We had him listed as like the starting nickel, but he'd play everywhere on the defense. But they really needed someone to replace Geno Stone because he signed with the Bengals during this offseason. So I've been wondering what their kind of plan was with the slot and safety spots, because the safety, it was kind of weak in terms of depth. So adding Eddie Jackson, I mean, I expect even if he doesn't start, he'll be used quite a bit. It just kind of depends on who wins out, like at the nickel spot. If they want to play Kyle Hamilton there more and have Eddie Jackson be at safety, it just depends on how they end up using him. But he's going to be very important for sure.
Absolutely. And you think that we talked a little bit yesterday about Cam Akers signing with the Texans, and I think they're just way too stacked in the running back room to be able to use him. Any thoughts on Cam Akers, Dave? And I mean, back in the day, he used to be thought of as the backfield savior for the Rams.
Yeah, and he was initially. I mean, Houston went hard at the running back market this offseason. They were one of the players in the Saquon Barkley sweepstakes. They settled on Joe Mixon. They have Dameon Pierce. They drafted Jawar Jordan. You can tell that this Houston team, they just keep wanting pumping talent into that offensive backfield. But he was a second rounder in 2020. Like you said, Rye, he started off real hot. He was their feature back down the stretch, I think over the last 5 or 6 games and into the playoffs. Goes out and tears his Achilles in preseason 2021. And then he actually came back, if you remember, towards the postseason. But then last year he tore the same Achilles. Actually, yeah, it was the same Achilles last November. So this is going to be a shot in the dark, potentially a last-ditch effort. Can he show something on tape in preseason? I think last time I talked to Tucker about this, it was pretty strongly confirmed that even if he plays well, he'll likely not make this roster because they're 4 or 5 deep right now. So Cam Akers might be viewing this opportunity, signing with Houston, as, hey, can I get some looks throughout the preseason to maybe get potentially picked up right before the season starts for a team that maybe loses a back at some point. But I don't think his future will be in Houston.
Yeah, he could end up being like a practice squad guy that ends up getting elevated, due to injury or what have you. And he'll get I think he'll get a chance to prove himself. But yeah, it's a question of where he'll have that chance.
Yep.
Do we think this is going to be a running back by committee offense, or will Joe Mixon be a true lead back?
It's tough. I mean, almost every backfield is a running back committee now. And I think Joe Mixon has shown that he can be a guy, but I don't think he can be the guy. And I don't think it matters. That team is going to revolve around CJ Stroud and his second year jump from an already high place. But I don't think it's really going to matter who the guy dominates the touches week to week. It'll probably vary. They've all had success. And I think that, especially Mixon and Pierce, we've seen them do it before. And it's best to keep these guys fresh as the year goes on, because this is a postseason team and they don't want to run anyone into the ground.
Yeah. Next news item on the sheet is Michael Gallup retires from the Raiders. And that was actually something, going back to an earlier depth chart show, we stumped Tucker. He forgot where Michael Gallup went, and so it's very hard to stump him.
Michael Gallup forgot where he went. I mean, he just fell off.
Exactly. I mean, after the Dallas Cowboys, everybody forgot about him, and he was in the Raiders. He has retired. Why did he retire, Tucker? Any news around that?
I honestly don't know why he retired. I know about why Shaq Barrett retired was for family reasons, but I don't know why. And also he's older, but I mean, Gallup, he kind of just, ever since like that ACL injury, he didn't play at the same level anymore. I haven't read about why he retired. He did get some money before he left the Cowboys, but I'm not really sure, to be honest. But I thought he was gonna compete for a starting spot for the Raiders with Trey Tucker, and if not starting, then he probably would have been like the top backup guy there. I honestly don't know too much about the details on that one.
Sorry, a dog is barking in the background here.
Don't you think Michael Gallup is kind of like the poster child of why franchises are nervous to give so much guaranteed money and such large contracts to their wide receivers?
And it's also why receivers want that big contract. You don't know what injury is going to derail your whole career. I mean, that happened with Gallup, and so it makes sense why both sides are apprehensive and wanting to get that. or not want to give the contract.
It feels like the Raiders. Go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to move the conversation to the Cowboys. Speaking of big contracts, CeeDee Lamb has been sitting out, and is Michael Gallup's former team. But what were you going to say on the Raiders, Corey?
It just seems, they have the highest paid wide receiver core in the league, and it seems like they are proverbial chasing Tim Brown and Rocket Ismail, for the missile, Rocket forever. And they just keep pumping.
The Raiders have the highest wide receiver payment?
That's what I read. Yeah, I didn't hear it from the coach or the GM, but
okay.
I read it anyways.
I guess I'm surprised by that. I guess Devontae Adams, Jacoby
is making a good amount as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
And Gallup was a hype. I mean, he was. Hell, he was starting for the job this year, and early on he was a top pick in fantasy for a couple straight years there. And then
he's never been a top pick in fantasy.
No, I mean not first, but I think he's been.
He was hyped after like that 1,100-yard season. I think that was 19, and then going into 20, people were pretty excited. But
he had one of the top contracts.
He could be, but okay, moving on to the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb sitting out, and the Cowboys have to deal with this contract, Dak Prescott's contract, Micah Parsons' contract. What are the Cowboys doing? Are they just overwhelmed right now with contracts, or is CeeDee Lamb really going to sit out? What's the latest news on this, Tucker?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ask most people, no one really knows what the Cowboys are doing. It's kind of been the theme of the whole offseason for them. I mean, CD isn't on the do not report list yet or anything like that, but it's definitely not a good sign. I don't know if Dak or if Micah Parsons are going to hold out, but I don't know how that's going to move forward. I feel like they have to budge, but then the other guys will be upset and want their money as well. It's kind of a hard place for the Cowboys here.
It seems like they don't want to give anybody more than 1 year, almost like they want to reshuffle the deck starting next season. Any thoughts on that, Dave? Oh, you're muted.
I think that there's no question they get this deal done. They have to get it done this year. Who knows where they're going to be at this time next season? But there's a lot of questions why behind how they would have handled Ezekiel Elliott, how they're handling Dak Prescott, how they've handled CeeDee Lamb. But Lamb is a no-brainer, have to do it type thing. I mean, the guy has more targets, more yards, more touchdowns, less drops, more catches every year of his career, 4 years in a row. And I went back and did a deep dive on receivers. I can't find a situation where that's happened, where everything across the board and the drops went down to coincide. So you're talking about all pro, a guy that's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. But, maybe Dallas is just waiting for that salary cap to jump up another $40 million next year, because right now I just don't see how this can be done. They've invested so much in their defensive side of the ball that, this is what happens when you do that. You can't pay everyone, but CeeDee Lamb he might even have to be the priority over Dak Prescott.
It kind of reminds me of the Vikings this offseason. I mean, they ended up letting Kirk Cousins walk, and they opted to sign Jefferson. I mean, I could see that type of thing happening, because there's some route they have to take here where they're going to lose, somebody big here. So, I mean,
what's tough about that is where Minnesota ended up in the draft order, it put them within striking distance of getting a quarterback, and they sat tight, or I think they traded up one spot to get JJ McCarthy, but Dallas is a good enough team, unless something really bad happens, they're not going to be in the top 15 in the draft. They're going to be and they're probably not going to be looking at a historic group of quarterbacks in the draft next year. So this is just where you're going to have to kind of let the dice roll and see what comes out on the other side. But the Dallas, they're still in a win now mode. They need to replace about 25% of the production in the passing game with Tony Pollard gone, Michael Gallup gone. And this offense without CeeDee Lamb is what what Tucker said, the Vikings would be without Justin Jefferson. It just won't work.
Yeah.
We got Justin Jefferson at pick 18,
Yeah,
didn't get him high, and St. Brown was high.
Yep.
Mike Evans, he was a low first round, right? Like
I think he was in the 20s. You have a lot of wide receivers that are taken in like outside of the top 10, outside of the top 15, even that end up being big time guys. But the quarterbacks, it's tough to find those guys. It's not impossible, but it's tough to find the guys that aren't picked in the top 10.
I talked to one Cowboys fan who has the theory that the Cowboys are tanking this year for Shedeur Sanders. They'll get rid of Dak Prescott and tanking for Shedeur Sanders. I don't think that seems a little ridiculous, right?
Do you think Prime will be the coach then?
I mean,
who?
Do you guys know Prime's been Shedeur's coach, I think, since 11th grade, like dating back to high school. So maybe that's why they're not going to extend Mike McCarthy another year, Corey. Maybe that's the grand master plan. Deion and Shedeur coming to Dallas. But, that would be a grave mistake in my opinion. I don't see it with him
It
yet.
feels like there's a lot of player coaches this year, and maybe I don't have the exact number on them, but like Dan Campbell, Raiders coaches.
Ryans.
Yeah. What's Raiders coaching? Why am I blanking?
Antonio Pierce.
Yeah. There's a couple other out there I know. Just can't think of their names.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, that would be a fun little thing to do. Just kind of do a little study. How many of the NFL coaches have played in the NFL?
Patriots coach.
Yep. The Texans head coach, Patriots.
Jaguars.
Definitely not the Dolphins. Definitely not.
I love him. He's the best.
Chargers and Jaguars as well.
Yeah, Chargers, Jaguars. I could see it happening.
Yeah, I don't know how feasible. I don't know if that's very. I mean, it's kind of fun to think about, but I don't really know how likely it is they're tanking. I mean, I know that I've like heard people discuss that they're trying to like push it off for one more year and then sort of reevaluate with the cap situation, like Dave mentioned.
Right.
But I'm not sure. I mean, like if CeeDee is just going to hold out, it's kind of you kind of have to budge at some point.
Well, Dave said it. I was going to say right when we started, different, same church, different pew. Like this is Groundhog's Day for the Cowboys. Every single year, one of their quote unquote big three seems like they're holding out. I mean, Dak was pretty straightforward. Like he came back and played and said he'll put it on himself. Right? I'm not mistaken. That's how it went down.
I mean, if that dude hits the market next year, he's probably going to set a record for a free agency contract. He will set a free agency contract record for the quarterback position, even though he's not one of the best guys. If you have multiple teams bidding for your services as an unrestricted free agent, it's going to drive the price up. So, if he can stay healthy, he's had a couple injuries, so he's got to stay healthy this year, and he's not young, but he will be very sought after if he hits the market. What would you guys do? What would you take CeeDee Lamb at, let's say, 50% of what you'd have to pay Dak Prescott, but not have a quarterback? Or would you pay Dak Prescott that premium price and have to go find a new wide receiver because CeeDee Lamb walks? What would you do?
I feel like that Dak Prescott is the black Kirk Cousins. And the number
I was going to call it like that, but that's what I was going to. He is a CEO. I mean, no off the field issues. Comes, plays balls, totes the company.
Yeah, and his numbers are very similar. And if the Vikings are willing to let Kirk Cousins walk, I can see the Cowboys willing to let Dak Prescott walk.
Yeah, where he's like not elite level, but he can be very good at his peak. It's just it's tough. And I feel like I normally would say like quarterback's the most important, but it's like you kind of want to opt for the younger, elite wide receiver, I'd say. But it is a tough. I don't know how you navigate that going forward, though. I mean, it's
the flip side is it's easier to find the next elite wide receiver than it is the next elite quarterback, in my opinion. It's just you look at some of these guys that have come out in recent drafts over the past 5 years. I mean, there's 5-6 studs at that position. I feel like every single year, but the quarterbacks, it's hit or miss.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, speaking of elite receivers, say again, Corey.
2 playoff wins. I'm taking Dak. If he doesn't win 2 playoff games, it's the same song.
That's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of elite receivers, we've got Mike Evans chasing Jerry Rice's consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. He's had 10 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Jerry Rice had 11. So if he gets to 1,000 yards this season, obviously he ties the record. What are our thoughts on Mike Evans, Dave? I mean, did you see this coming when he was coming into the league?
I did not. I had a late first, early second round grade on him, which is another way of saying I think he could be a solid number 2. So maybe a very good number 2, a below average number 1. And the funny thing about his career, it's that it never is CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, but it's just every single year. This is what a popular debate in sports, any sport, is: do you want the guy that is just consistently good, but maybe never the best? Or do you want to see the flash in the pan in the career that lasts 6, 7, 8 years? Calvin Johnson, right? Do you want a Mike Evans? Do you want a Calvin Johnson? What is considered better? Calvin Johnson's a Hall of Famer. Mike Evans will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But yeah, the most impressive part about his game, in contrast to Jerry Rice, look at the quarterbacks he's played with. Besides Tom Brady, it's been a bunch of nobodies, and no matter who he is, and like that when you stand the test of time like
and
that,
he got Tom Brady at the very end too.
Yeah,
so
exactly. It wasn't.
He probably had his worst years with Tom Brady just because
spreads the ball out so much. So he's been just. I mean, he's got all my respect, and that's one of those guys you're more than happy to say, hey, I was probably a little off on him coming out of Texas A&M. I still can have vivid memories of watching his college tape. And it's, his game has only gotten better. And that says a lot about him as a person too, because mostly when guys hit the age of 30, they start going south.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the Buccaneers depth chart, because
you never answered the question. Do you think he's going to get Jerry Rice's consecutive season 1,000 yards?
I do. I think he'll hit it. Just because there's no reason not to. This is what people did with Tom Brady at the end of his career. Like eventually, oh, they're not going to get it done. They're not going to get it done. He just kept on getting it done. That's kind of like the all-time great Mike Evans that he has in him. And there's not much on there that's going to take a lot of targets away from him. Baker Mayfield knows he's got to get him involved. So, and that team.
Behind. When you're looking at the wide receiver room behind Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, there's just not a lot there. Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett, Sterling Shepard, who never worked out with the Giants. So it feels like Mike Evans is going to have to still take a lot of targets.
Yeah, it looks like their offense is pretty similar to how it was last year, besides adding in Jalen McMillan. They lost, Russell Gage last year, so it's pretty much the same type of room again, unless Jalen McMillan can be a...
Do we see Jalen McMillan, Dave, getting much playing time?
Yeah, I think he's going to compete with Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer was a speedster rookie last year, obviously drafted around 6, as you can see. Didn't do much early in the year, but he did start to flash. I think he made the Ourlads all-rookie team twice in the back half of the year. His big play potential started to show up. McMillan is a guy that is a little bit more polished than Palmer, so it depends how new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen's going to want to kind of implement his passing tree into this group of guys. But normally receivers that are taking day 2, you don't see a huge impact early on, so Palmer will get the initial look. But McMillan is a guy that can steal targets away from Mike Evans this year, because he is a very NFL-ready player from a route running and ball skill perspective. He just ran into a couple of injury issues, and then Washington wide receiver room was so stacked with McMillan there that when he did go down, he just lost his spot. Good player.
What's his calling card? Is he? You said he's good at running routes. Is he a speedster? Is he a big size guy? He's
average across the board when it comes. He's a little undersized, but he's tough. He runs good routes and he doesn't drop the football. So it's just kind of, jack of all trades, master of none type, not a specialist.
Because it's like Mike Evans, he's a big target. Jerry Rice would be towering over me, but 6'3" versus 6'5". Mike's a big bodied guy, which I think will bode well for him to get that 1,000 yards.
Well, what everyone should know on these depth charts is that you can click on these guys, right? And you can click on Jalen McMillan and his draft profile comes up. That's one thing I love about the Ourlads depth charts that, I work for Ourlads. Some of these reports I wrote, but, if a guy that comes in to the league in 2016, you want to kind of see what we had written about him coming out of college. And it just gives you a deeper understanding of what these guys could be in a year or two, or if Mike Evans were to ever go down, or Chris Godwin, can this guy be someone that pops in?
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm just showing the player profile right there. We're going to go back to the depth chart, though, because we want to go to the defensive side of the ball. Randy Gregory did not show up for camp. No show, no call, right, Tucker? So he's off the team?
Yeah. Well, probably that's usually what happens. It's not like the other guys we mentioned, like Trent Williams and I'm blanking who's the other did not report. Hassan Reddick. It's not like them, like their contract holdouts, but this is more when you're not placed on the do not report and it's not like contract related, then usually you're probably like considering retiring or something of that nature. So
yeah.
I wouldn't really be surprised if that was what occurred. But I haven't heard any news about it since him being placed. But he was probably just going to play a depth role at edge. They have a pretty good edge. It's very young now that they lost Shaq Barrett. And now obviously Jack Barrett retired as well. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. They got Chris Braswell was kind of the guy they got this year since they knew that Shaq Barrett was leaving. Yaya Diaby that they drafted last year. Dave, do you have any thoughts on their young pass rushers? I like Anthony Nelson out of Iowa personally, but I know they're bringing in a lot of young guys.
Yeah, I mean, another great part about the Ourlads depth charts is, again, simple, clean. You can look at the year in which these guys were drafted and what round they were taken in. So just start at the top. Logan Hall, 2nd round pick. Vita Vea, 1st round pick. Cansey, 1st round pick. Tryon Shanka, 1st round pick. Yaya Diaby, 3rd round pick. Look at the amount of resources this organization has put into that defensive front. And that's why you can lose a guy like Shaq Barrett. That's why you can take a risk on a guy like Randy Gregory and say, hey, if he doesn't pay off, we're still okay. We're not relying on him. I mean, right, if you scroll down a little bit below the special teams and you click on Randy Gregory, consider the fact this guy was a problem coming out of college. That's why he went from a 1st-round prospect to the end of round 2. And just look at the right side, the player history, his transaction history. I mean, right away, substance abuse, suspensions, back and forth over the course of multiple years. And, I mean, God bless the kid that he stayed in the game and he cleaned up his act, and he has had a couple of really good years. I mean, with Dallas and Denver, he popped, especially in Dallas, and that's why he got a couple of different contracts. But, some teams will take a risk on a Randy Gregory tight and know, hey, we need this kid to pan out. And it could be character maturity based like this. It could be an injury risk. It could be an age risk, kind of like what Baltimore did with Eddie Jackson, who's going to turn 30 years old. You can do that when you know that these backup options, your plan B, plan C, are there, or you even consider Randy Gregory a plan B or plan C. So I don't think him not showing up, getting kicked out off the team is going to impact these guys one bit.
Okay. Well, that's good to know if you're a Buccaneers fan. Anything else on the Bucs, or should we move on to our next story, or our final story, actually?
I think we're good.
All right.
The Dolphins.
Tucker says we're good to move on. Shaq Barrett retires a month after signing with the Dolphins. What does this mean for their edge rusher depth? Let's talk about it. Tucker.
Yeah, so obviously they have Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, who both tore their ACLs, right? Last year. And so
yes.
It was surprising to some people that they took an edge in the 1st round with Chop Robinson, but it was not really that surprising if you look at the context and why. I mean, when you have Phillips and Chubb both likely not going to be ready for the start, Chubb will probably be quite a while. Then you're going to need to reinforce that room. And so getting Chop Robinson and also getting Mo Kamara in the 5th round, those were huge. But they kind of brought in Shaq Barrett to sort of be that top guy while the younger guys get used to the speed of the game, and to be the top guy in place of Phillips and Chubb. So that was a huge loss, I think, for them. But they have some guys they ended up bringing back Emmanuel Ogbah from last year. Dave, do you have any thoughts on their young guys they're bringing in?
You brought up a great point. I think the most important part about the future of this edge room is the fact that Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, their contract, they're going to get paid soon. And we also know that Tua is about to get paid. And you know that when you pay a quarterback, you're not going to be able to pay both these guys. There's no question. Jalen Phillips or Bradley Chubb will not be a Miami Dolphin within the next year or two. So, I think Phillips will come back. He actually, I think he did his Achilles last year, if I remember correctly, and Chubb was the ACL. But like you said, they bring in Chop Robinson, and the name that if Coop was on, John Cooper was on with us, we both love this kid coming out last year, Mo Kamara. The irony here is that the name that kept on coming up and scouting him last year at Colorado State was former outside linebacker from Colorado State, Shaq Barrett. I mean, almost identical size, identical production, identical, hey, start from nothing, end up being the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. And then they ended up on the same roster. It was ironic. And I was really looking forward to watching these two play and see if Shaq Barrett could bring Kamara along. But I didn't really read up on why he retired, but I'm assuming age, body doesn't feel good. The passion's not there to put yourself
family issues. Is that what you said?
Well, I know
Tucker?
His daughter, he had a young daughter pass away. It was horrible, like a year ago or 2 years ago. And I know he wants to spend more time with his family, which totally makes sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, he is older as well, but
yeah. So, I mean, it's unfortunate on multiple levels that we're not going to get to see him play, but he, to me, was going to be more of a specialist, a 15 snap per game type guy, especially when the other two guys came back, and maybe a little bit of a security blanket if Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips took a little bit longer to get back on the field. But also I thought he was going to be more of a mentor towards Mo Kamara. And, who knows? Maybe they have a relationship that he doesn't need to actually be on the field for him to mentor Kamara. Is this really going to hurt the team? I don't think so. He wasn't going to come in here and be their number 1 or number 2 pass rusher. They just simply lost a depth piece and an accessory guy and maybe a veteran presence. And there is value in that. But if I'm a Dolphins fan, I'm not freaking out over this.
Okay, well, good. Dolphins fans should not freak out over Shaq Barrett leaving. I'm saying that out loud because I'm at my friend's place who is a Dolphins fan. And so
I thought you were in the jungle with that tree behind you.
Yeah, well, it does look like the jungle in here with the tree behind me. Absolutely.
Your friend is just pacing back and forth, listening to us talk about.
Yeah, more or less. All right. So another loss for the Dolphins was Taj Washington, who he was going to be possibly one of their returners, right?
Yeah, competing with Braxton Berrios, maybe be a second return guy there.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was gonna, I don't know how likely it was he'd make the roster, but I mean, he would have had a shot to be that guy in the practice squad they can bring up. It just, Dave, did you have anything on him at all, like in terms of maybe not just special teams, but did he offer anything, do you think, offensively?
Yeah, he offered definitely something as a slot, but that wide receiver room is really crowded, and especially after they signed Odell and they drafted Malik Washington, the kid I absolutely love. That was one of my favorite value picks that, again, ironically, the name Tyreek Hill kept on coming up when looking at his size profile and production. Here they are ending up on the same team. But now, I mean, Taj Washington, he was a very undersized wide receiver. You had obviously Tyreek in front of him, Braxton Berrios in front of him, Malik Washington in front of him because, he was drafted ahead of him. And then even some of these other names, I mean, Anthony Schwartz and Ezukama, these are guys that they've been in this system. They have the speed. They had that profile. So his route to making this roster would have been as a returner. But Berrios is one of the best in the game at that role. And you're not going to keep a guy on an active roster to be your backup returner. So he was likely heading towards a practice squad slot, which still has value with the way that injuries pop up these days. But it's probably going to be a good way for what I call a stash. They're just going to be able to stash this kid and wait to see how this roster shakes up next year. And now they already have kind of an in-house option that knows the offense and maybe, I mean, you never know what that receiver room is going to look like next year. I'd be surprised if Odell's still there. You don't know if Berrios will still be there. Who knows if these other guys will pan out. So it's kind of just like a safety net for next year. That's the way I view him now.
That totally makes sense. And then does that help Malik Washington definitely make the team with Taj out? Like as far as would they have been competing for the same spot?
I think Malik had the inside track there. He had a special season. He was drafted ahead of him. He's a better athlete. I don't think unless an injury popped up, there was any shot that Taj would have leapfrogged Malik on that wide receiver depth chart. But it definitely should make Malik sleep a little bit better at night, knowing there isn't another guy trying to catch him from behind.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else on the Dolphins, or should we wrap this baby up?
I want to mention they did bring in Calais Campbell, and I think that he could be a great mentor for their edge guys and their interior guys. He was great last year with the Falcons, kind of bringing them up, and he led them in sacks. It was crazy.
Yeah, that was because how long has he been in the league now? 12 years?
No,
is it that
17. 17.
17 years? Jeez. Wow.
Yeah.
That is. And he led the Falcons in sacks. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he's 37.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will be back next week at the same time, same place across our lads channels. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like this video. Dave Syvertsen, Tucker Moss, and Cory Henke, thank you so much for joining me. Any final words, guys?
Thank you, Ryan. Have fun in the jungle.
Love those words of wisdom from Dave.
Dave, what's your Twitter handle?
Ourlads_Psy. Getting a lot of action. Yeah, we're putting a lot of stuff out there over the next month or two. So if you keep checking back, you'll find something fresh every day.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.